The crystal towers of reached toward three purple suns, their surfaces gleaming like polished diamonds in the alien light. Commander stood before the massive doors of the ancestral vault, her four arms trembling slightly beneath her ceremonial armor. Today was the day she would claim her birthright. Today would finally be hers. The weapon had chosen every heir for 3,000 years. Never once had it rejected a member of her bloodline. The thought should have brought comfort, but something cold twisted in her stomach as she approached the ancient chamber. "Are you ready, Commander?" asked Eldor, his voice echoing through the vast hallway. His silver robes rustled as he moved, the sound sharp in the silence. Nodded, not trusting her voice. She had trained for this moment since childhood. Every combat form, every meditation technique, every lesson about their warrior heritage had led to this single day. The day she would bond with the most powerful weapon in history. The vault doors opened with a deep rumble that seemed to come from the planet itself. Inside, golden light poured from floating crystals that had burned for. At the center of the chamber, suspended in a pillar of pure energy, hung. The blade was beautiful and terrible. Its edge gleamed with blue plasma that could cut through any known material. The handle was carved from black metal that had come from the first star their people had ever seen die. But most important was the crystal at its heart, a living gem that pulsed with intelligent light. Walked forward on legs that felt like stone. Each step echoed in the sacred space. Around her, the other elders watched in silence. This was not just a ceremony. This was the continuation of a bloodline that had protected their people since the beginning of recorded time. She reached the energy pillar and stopped. The ritual required her to speak the ancient words first. "I am of house," she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Daughter of warriors, keeper of honor, protector of the innocent. I come to claim what is mine by right of blood and deed." The crystal impulsed brighter. This was the moment. This was when the weapon would recognize her and accept her as its new master. She reached out with her primary hand, fingers extending toward the plasma blade. The moment her skin touched the weapon, everything went wrong. Pain exploded through her mind like lightning. The crystal flared white-hot, then suddenly went completely dark. The energy pillar collapsed, and the weapon fell to the floor with a sound like breaking glass. Screamed and fell backward, clutching her head. Images flashed through her mind, strange visions of alien skis and unknown stars. For just an instant, she saw a world covered in blue water and white clouds, with creatures that walked on only two legs. Then the pain was gone, leaving only emptiness. Eldor rushed forward, his face pale with shock. "What happened? What did you see?" Stared at where it lay on the cold stone floor. The blade was completely dark now. No plasma edge, no glowing crystal. It looked like nothing more than an old piece of metal. It rejected me," she whispered. The words felt like poison in her mouth. "Impossible," said another elder. "The blade has never rejected an heir, never in 3,000 years." But there was no arguing with what they had all witnessed. Lay dead and dark, and felt hollow inside, as if something important had been torn from her soul. Eldor picked up the weapon with careful hands. Even touching it directly, nothing happened. No light, no energy, no sign of the intelligence that had once lived within. "The blade has gone into deep sleep," he said slowly. "This has happened before, but not for over 5,000 years. The old texts speak of it as the calling." "What does that mean?" asked, though part of her already feared the answer. "It means the weapon has sensed its true chosen one somewhere in the galaxy. Until it finds them, it will remain dormant." The words hit like a physical blow. "But I am the chosen one. The blade belongs to my family." Eldor's expression was full of pity. "The blade chooses its own path, child. We are merely servants to its will." The formal ceremony that should have celebrated her ascension instead became something else entirely. The elders spoke in hushed tones about ancient laws and forgotten protocols. Words like severed and outcast drifted through the air like knives. By sunset, it was official, was no longer a member of House. Her military rank was stripped away. Her name was removed from all records. She had become nothing more than a shadow of her former self. That night, alone in quarters that were no longer hers, stared at the star-filled sky through her window. Somewhere out there was the being that had chosen over her. Somewhere in the vast darkness was the creature that had stolen her destiny. The rational part of her mind knew she should accept what had happened. The elders had given her a small ship and enough supplies to start a new life somewhere far from. She could find work as a mercenary or a guard. She could disappear and try to forget that she had ever been meant for greatness. But the warrior part of her, the part that had been trained since birth to never surrender, had a different idea. If wanted its true chosen one, then she would find them. She would discover why the blade had rejected 3,000 years of tradition for some unknown alien. And maybe, just maybe, she would find a way to prove that she was worthy after all. The next morning, as the three suns rose over crystal spires, did something that no member of her family had ever done before. She stole. The blade came away from its resting place without resistance, still dark and cold in her hands. But as she carried it toward her ship, she could have sworn she felt something, a tiny pulse of warmth, so faint it might have been her imagination, was leading her somewhere. And despite everything that had happened, despite the pain and the shame and the loss, was going to follow. Captain was having the worst day of his life, and that was saying something for a man who had survived 3 wars and a divorce. His salvage ship, the Rust Bucket, drifted near Jupiter's orbit while he tried to figure out why his engines had decided to take a vacation. The diagnostic systems kept showing green lights, but every time he hit the throttle, nothing happened except a sound like an angry cat. "Come on, you piece of junk," muttered, hitting the control panel with his fist. The ship had been old when he bought it 5 years ago, and it had only gotten older and more stubborn since then. He was about to try hitting it again when his proximity alarm started screaming. Looked at his scanner display and felt his stomach drop. Something big was coming in fast from the outer system. Too fast and too quiet to be human technology. The ship that appeared on his screen a few minutes later definitely wasn't from Earth. It looked like someone had taken a crystal cathedral and decided to make it fly. Beautiful curved spires jutted out from a central hull that seemed to be made of some kind of translucent material that glowed with its own light. It was also trailing debris and moving in the slow, tumbling way that meant serious damage. Grabbed his radio. "Unknown vessel, this is captain of the salvage ship Rust Bucket. Your ship appears to be in distress. Do you require assistance?" For a long moment there was only static. Then a voice came through, speaking heavily accented English. "Human vessel. Yes, we require assistance. Our pursuit drives are damaged and our pilot is injured." The voice sounded female, though with alien vocal cords it was hard to be sure. More importantly, she had said human vessel like she knew what humans were. Had heard rumors that Earth had made contact with alien civilizations, but the government kept most of it classified. Meeting one face-to-face had never been on his list of career goals. "I'm coming alongside," said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Prepare for docking." As the Rust Bucket moved closer, could see the alien ship more clearly. The damage was extensive blast marks and hull breaches that looked like weapons fire. Someone had been hunting this ship, and they had found it. The docking went smoother than expected. The alien ship's airlock was designed for creatures that were taller than humans, but it worked well enough. Put on his pressure suit and grabbed his emergency medical kit, just in case. The airlock cycled, and got his first look at an actual alien. She was tall, probably 7 feet, with 4 arms and skin that looked like it was made of dark blue silk. Her face was almost human, except for the large golden eyes and the small crest of bone that ran along the top of her skull. She was wearing some kind of armor that looked like it had been made by angels, all flowing lines and careful curves. She was also bleeding from several cuts on her arms and face, and she looked exhausted. "I am," she said, leaning against the wall for support. "I am grateful for your aid, human." He replied, pulling out his medical kit. "Let me take a look at those cuts." She seemed surprised by his offer to help, but she didn't resist as he cleaned and bandaged her wounds. As he worked, noticed something else in the ship's main compartment, a sword of some kind, lying on what looked like an altar. The weapon was beautiful and strange. It had the basic shape of a sword, but it was clearly made with technology far beyond anything Earth possessed. The blade itself seemed to be made of energy contained in some kind of field, though right now it was dark and inactive. "That's," said, noticing his gaze, was the weapon of my family." Finished bandaging her arm and looked back at the sword. Something about it made him feel strange, like there was a song playing just at the edge of his hearing. "It looks ancient," he said. 3,000 years old, confirmed, "and it has chosen you." Blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" Before could answer, the ship's proximity alarm started wailing again. Rushed to the nearest and felt his blood run cold. 6 ships had just appeared at the edge of sensor range. They were the same basic design as vessel, but larger and clearly built for war. Weapon systems glowed like angry eyes along their hulls. "The fleet," said, her voice full of despair. "They have found me." "Friends of yours?" asked. "My people, they believe I have stolen," she gestured toward the dark sword. "They are not wrong." The radio crackled to life, and a harsh alien voice filled the air. "Outcast, you will return the sacred blade immediately and surrender yourself for judgment. You have dishonored our people for the last time." Looked between the approaching warships and the exhausted alien woman. He had always been good at reading people, and everything about told him she was running from something terrible. "There has to be another way," he said. "There is no other way," replied. "They will take and execute me for theft. It is the law." Found himself moving toward the sword before he realized what he was doing. That strange feeling was getting stronger, like a tuning fork was vibrating in his bones. "Don't touch it," warned. "The blade is dangerous too." His hand closed around the sword's handle. Light exploded through the ship. Golden fire erupted from the blade's edge, so bright that both and had to shield their eyes. The weapon hummed in its grip, and suddenly his mind was full of images and sensations that weren't his own. He saw countless battles fought across thousands of years. He felt the pride and honor of warriors who had wielded this blade in defense of their people. He understood, without knowing how, that was not just a weapon but a living thing with its own will and purpose. And he knew, with absolute certainty, that the blade had been waiting for him. "Impossible," whispered. "The blade has never shown golden fire, never in all its history." Looked at the weapon in his hands. It felt perfectly balanced, like it had been made specifically for him. The golden energy coming from its edge was warm and comforting, not dangerous at all. "It's beautiful," he said. "It's choosing you," corrected. "A human. Over 3,000 years of my family's bloodline, and it chooses a human." The radio crackled again. "Outcast, you have 30 seconds to respond or we will open fire." Looked at the approaching warships, then at the magnificent weapon in his hands. He had spent most of his life running from responsibilities and commitments, but something about this moment felt different. This felt important. "Tell them," he said, "that the blade has made its choice, and if they want it, they can come and take it." Stared at him in shock. "You don't understand. These are warships. They have weapons that could destroy your entire planet." Smiled, feeling the warm pulse of the blade in his grip. "Then I guess we'd better make sure they don't get the chance." The mining colony on Mars was not the kind of place anyone chose to visit. Red dust covered everything. The air recyclers made a constant wheezing sound, and the local beer tasted like metal shavings. But it was far enough from Earth to be safe, and nobody asked questions about strangers with unusual cargo, and had been hiding in the colony's abandoned Section C for 2 weeks, and the tension between them was thick enough to cut with a knife. "No, no, no," shouted, watching swing in a wide arc that completely ignored 3,000 years of proper technique. "You must hold your center, feel the blade's balance. You fight like a barbarian with a club." Stopped mid-swing and glared at her. This barbarian just cut through 6 inches of titanium steel like it was paper. "Maybe your people's way isn't the only way. My people's way has kept wielders alive for countless generations." "Yeah, well, your people's way also got you kicked out and branded a thief," shot back, immediately regretting the words when he saw the pain flash across his face. She turned away from him, her 4 arms crossed tightly across her chest. "You are right. My way failed. Perhaps that is why the blade chose you instead." Sat down carefully and walked over to her. Even sitting on a storage crate, she was taller than he was. "Look, I'm sorry," he said. "That was out of line. I know this is hard for you." "Hard?" laughed bitterly. "I have lost everything. My family, my honor, my purpose. And now I watch a human master the weapon that was supposed to be my birthright, and he makes it stronger than it has ever been in our hands." It was true, and they both knew it. Every day grew more powerful in its grip. The blade had started changing within hours of choosing him. The blue plasma had shifted to gold, and new abilities kept appearing. Yesterday had accidentally cut a hole in space itself, a tear in reality that let him step from one side of the room to the other in an instant. This morning, he had discovered he could create shields of pure energy that could stop anything from bullets to plasma bolts. "Maybe that's the point," said thoughtfully. "Maybe the blade wasn't supposed to stay the same forever." Looked at him with those large golden eyes. "What do you mean? You keep talking about tradition and proper technique, but what if that was holding the blade back? What if it needed someone who didn't know the right way to do things?" Before could respond, their proximity alarm started beeping. Grabbed a pair of binoculars and looked out through the dusty window. 3 ships were landing at the colony's main port, and they definitely weren't human vessels. "Your brother found us," he said. Moved to the window and peered out. Her face went pale when she saw the lead ship. "Or, he commands the pursuit fleet now." "Let me guess, he's not here to talk." "My brother believes in honor above all else. To him, I am a traitor who must be punished, and you are a thief who has corrupted our most sacred weapon." She paused. "He will challenge you to single combat." Picked up, feeling the familiar warmth flow through his hands. "What happens if I win?" "If you win, the fleet must withdraw and leave your people in peace. It is ancient law." "And if I lose?" His expression was grim. "You die, and they take back to our. Then they return with the full fleet and destroy your planet for harboring thieves." Nodded slowly, no pressure then. The radio in their hideout crackled to life. A harsh voice spoke in the language and translated. "He demands that we present ourselves at the colony's main square within 1 hour, or he will begin killing civilians." Strapped to his back and started checking his gear. "How good is your brother?" "He is the finest warrior our people have produced in 5 centuries. He has never lost a duel. He wields the sister blade too." "Great. Any other good news you want to share?" Was quiet for a moment. "There is something you should know about, something the elders never told anyone." Stopped preparing and looked at her. "The weapon was not created by our people," she said. "We found it thousands of years ago, in the ruins of a dead civilization. The being who made it left behind one message, that the blade would wait until it found a species that could unlock its true potential." "And you think that species is humanity?" I think, said carefully, that your people are very different from mine. You adapt. You change. You refuse to accept that things must always be done the same way. Perhaps that is what was waiting for. They made their way through the colony's tunnels toward the main square. Could feel humming with energy on his back, as if the blade was eager for what was coming. When they reached the square, a crowd had already gathered. The colonists stood well back, clearly terrified of the armored aliens who had invaded their quiet mining station. Or stood in the center of the square and could see the family resemblance immediately. He was taller than and broader, with the same blue skin and golden eyes. But where she moved with graceful precision, he radiated barely controlled violence. The weapon on his back was almost as long as he was tall. Looked like dark twin black metal and purple energy that seemed to absorb light rather than create it. So, or said in heavily accented English, this is the human who dares to wield our sacred blade. Stepped forward, his hand resting on its handle. I didn't ask to wield it. The blade chose me. The blade was confused by alien thoughts. I will correct its mistake. Or drew in one smooth motion, and the purple energy of its edge howled like a tortured wind. Drew and golden fire blazed to life. The two weapons seemed to recognize each other, their energies crackling and sparking in the dry Martian air. By the ancient laws, or announced to the watching crowd, I challenge the human to single combat. Victory will determine the fate of and the world that shelters thieves. Looked around at the frightened faces of the colonists, then at, who watched him with an expression he couldn't quite read. I accept, he said. The two warriors began to circle each other, weapons ready. Had been in plenty of fights, but never anything like this. Or moved with the fluid grace of someone who had trained for centuries, his blade weaving patterns in the air that hurt to look at. On the other hand, moved like a street fighter who had learned to survive by being unpredictable. When or attacked, it was with perfect technique and overwhelming force. Barely managed to get up in time to block the strike, and the impact sent him skidding backward across the dusty ground. You see, or called out, the human cannot even hold the blade properly, it is wasted on him. But as the fight continued, something strange began to happen. Every time was forced to adapt, to find a new way to counter or's perfect technique, seemed to grow stronger. The golden energy became brighter, more focused, and began to understand what the blade was trying to show him. It wasn't just a weapon. It was a tool for change, for growth, for breaking through the limitations that others accepted as unchangeable. When smiled in the middle of the deadly duel, or's perfect confidence finally began to crack. The asteroid they chose for the final duel was nothing special, just another chunk of rock and ice drifting in the space between Mars and Jupiter. But it would be remembered forever as the place where everything changed. Stood on one side of the small plateau, looking up at the stars through his pressure suit's visor. Somewhere among those distant lights was Earth and everyone he had ever cared about. If he lost this fight, they would all die. No pressure at all. Across from him, or checked his weapon one final time. Hummed with dark energy that seemed to bend the starlight around it. The champion had agreed to the change of location, but only because ancient law required that blade duels be fought in neutral space. This is being broadcast across both our civilizations, said over the radio. She was watching from her ship, along with representatives from a dozen worlds. Whatever happens here will be witnessed by billions. Drew and golden fire blazed to life in the vacuum of space. The blade had continued to evolve during their journey to the asteroid. Now it seemed less like a weapon and more like a piece of captured starlight. Last chance, human, or said through the comm system. Surrender and accept exile. Your death serves no purpose. My death serves the same purpose as my life, replied, protecting the people I care about. Or's laugh was cold and sharp, noble words from a thief, Let us see if your blade skills match your rhetoric." The duel began without warning, or moved like liquid lightning, crossing the distance between them in a single bound, swept towards neck in an arc that would have been impossible to see with normal human eyes. But wasn't using normal human eyes anymore. Had been teaching him, sharing the combat experience of 3,000 years' worth of previous wielders. He saw the attack coming and twisted away, bringing his own blade up in a counterstrike that forced or to retreat. "Interesting," the warrior said. "The blade has taught you our ways, but technique alone will not save you." Or attacked again, this time with a combination of strikes that tested every defensive form had learned. The human managed to block or dodge most of them, but several got through, leaving smoking cuts on his armor. "You fight well for a barbarian," Or admitted, "but you lack the centuries of experience that true mastery requires." Said nothing. He was starting to understand something important about the way wanted him to fight. The blade wasn't trying to make him into a copy of previous warriors. It was trying to show him how to be something entirely new. The next exchange was faster and more brutal, or pressed his advantage, using his ability to cut through energy shields and force fields. Found himself giving ground, barely staying ahead of strikes that could have killed him instantly. But every time he was forced to adapt, to find a solution that no warrior would have considered, responded with new capabilities. When Or cornered him against a ridge of stone, didn't try to fight his way out through superior technique. Instead, he used space-cutting ability to open a portal behind his opponent and step through it, appearing where Or least expected. "Impossible," Or snarled, "has never possessed such abilities." "Maybe," said, breathing hard, "because no one ever asked it to." The fight continued across the asteroid's surface, Or was stronger, faster, and more experienced, but was unpredictable in ways that centuries of formal training couldn't prepare anyone for. When the champion tried to pin him down with a series of traditional attack patterns, responded by throwing rocks with his free hand, while simultaneously using to create energy barriers that moved independently of his body. "You fight without honor," Or accused. "I fight to win," replied. "There's a difference." That was when showed him the truth. The revelation came like a lightning bolt through his mind. Images flooded his consciousness, not from the blade's previous wielders, but from its creators. An ancient race that had traveled between the stars long before they had even developed language. They had created weapons like not to serve any single species, but to test them, to find the races that had the potential to grow beyond their limitations and become something greater. "The blade was never meant for your people alone," said, understanding flooding through him. "It was a test, a challenge waiting for someone who could think beyond the rules." Or's attack faltered for just a moment. "What are you saying?" "Your people found and made it fit your traditions. You taught it to be a weapon, but that was never what it was supposed to become." Raised high, and the golden energy blazed brighter than ever before. For the first time since the duel began, he went on the offensive. But he didn't attack with any technique that had ever developed. Instead, he fought like a human, improvising, adapting, combining elements from every fighting style he had ever learned. Military training mixed with street fighting, formal fencing blended with moves he had seen in movies. Or tried to counter with perfect technique, but perfection couldn't adapt fast enough. Every time he expected to follow a logical pattern, the human did something unexpected instead. The climax came when Or attempted his most devastating attack, a strike that used energy to create a field of destructive force around his opponent. No warrior in history had ever survived it. Looked at the expanding field of dark energy and smiled. Instead of trying to block or dodge, he used space-cutting ability to slice through the fabric of reality itself. The portal he created didn't just let him escape, it redirected Or's own attack back at him. The champion barely managed to deflect his own strike, but the effort left him off balance and vulnerable, pressed his advantage, and within moments was spinning away into space while or lay on the asteroid's surface, defeated. Yield said, holding his blazing point at his opponent's throat, or stared up at him with a mixture of shock and something that might have been respect. How? You are barely past childhood by our standards. How did you master abilities that our greatest warriors never dreamed of? Helped the defeated to his feet, because I didn't know they were impossible. As they stood together on the small asteroid, surrounded by the vast darkness of space, felt pulse with something like satisfaction. The weapon had finally found what it had been searching for, not just a wielder, but a partner who could help it become more than it had ever been. The duel is over, or said into his communicator, his voice heavy with defeat and wonder. By ancient law, the human has won, remains in his keeping, and our fleet will withdraw from this system. But as the words echoed across space, realized that the duel had been about more than just keeping Earth safe. It had been about proving that growth and change were possible, even for traditions that had remained unchanged for. The blade had chosen well, and this was only the beginning. 3 months after the duel, stood in the council chambers of the United Earth Assembly, holding in hands that no longer trembled when he gripped the ancient weapon. Representatives from 47 nations sat before him, and their faces showed every emotion from wonder to fear. You're asking us to trust aliens who wanted to destroy our planet 3 months ago, said President of the Pacific Federation. Forgive me if we're a little cautious. Understood their concerns. The idea of an alliance with this seemed impossible after they had threatened to orbital bomb Earth. But a lot had changed since the duel on the asteroid. They aren't our enemies, he said. They never were, they were just stuck in traditions that had stopped serving their purpose centuries ago. Beside him, stepped forward. She wore simple clothes instead of her warrior armor, and her 4 arms were relaxed at her sides. The change in her over the past months had been remarkable to watch. My people have spent 3,000 years believing that strength came from following the ancient ways perfectly, she said. Showed us that true strength comes from growth and adaptation. On the main screen at the front of the room, Elder Or's image appeared. The old looked tired but peaceful, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. The High Council has reviewed the recordings of the duel, he said. We have also studied the changes that underwent in human hands. We can no longer deny what the weapon has been trying to teach us. Which is, asked the Secretary General. That we have been using wrong for 3,000 years, Elder Or admitted. The blade was never meant to preserve tradition. It was meant to inspire change. Felt pulse with warm approval on his back. The weapon had been teaching him more than just combat techniques over the past months. It had been showing him visions of its creators, an ancient race that had seeded the galaxy with test weapons, waiting for civilizations that were ready to move beyond their limitations. There are others, said, other weapons scattered across the galaxy, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all waiting for the right wielders. And you think humans should go looking for them? Asked President. I think humans and should go looking for them together, corrected. Each weapon seems to respond to different qualities. Chose me because I could think outside established patterns. But other weapons might choose someone who values honor above all else, or someone who understands sacrifice, or someone who can see connections that others miss. Nodded. My brother Or has already volunteered to be the first to train with human combat instructors. He says the duel showed him that there are ways to fight that he never considered. The idea of Or learning human fighting techniques would have been funny a few months ago. Now it seemed like the most natural thing in the world. What exactly are you proposing? Asked the Secretary General. Stepped forward. The Blade Compact, a joint organization dedicated to finding and protecting ancient weapons before they fall into the wrong hands. humans and working together, combining our different strengths. And who would lead this organization? We would, said simply. And he has acceptance and understands its evolving capabilities. I have knowledge of space and access to our historical archives. The discussion that followed lasted for hours. There were concerns about security, about technology sharing, about what would happen if they found weapons that were too dangerous for anyone to wield. But in the end, the vote was unanimous. The Blade Compact was officially founded 6 weeks later, with as its first director and as chief of alien relations. Their first headquarters was a converted space station in orbit around Earth, staffed by volunteers from both species. Stood in the station's observation deck, watching Earth turn slowly below. Joined him at the viewing window, and they stood in comfortable silence for a while. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked finally. "Your old life was simpler, fewer responsibilities." Thought about his years as a salvage captain, drifting from job to job with no real purpose beyond earning enough money to keep flying. It seemed like another person's life now. "I was drifting," he said. "Just going through the motions. Didn't just give me power, it gave me direction." "And what direction is that?" Touched the weapon's handle where it rested against his back. "Forward, always forward." Their first mission came 2 weeks later. Long-range sensors had detected energy signatures on a dead world at the edge of space. The readings matched the profile of dormant ancient weapons. And took a small crew of volunteers, humans and working side by side for the first time in either species' history. The journey took 6 days, and by the time they reached their destination, they had become a real team. The planet was a tomb world, covered in the ruins of a civilization that had died out millions of years ago. But in the deepest vault of their largest city, they found what they were looking for. 7 weapons waited in crystalline cases, each one different from the others. A staff that hummed with elemental energy, a bow that fired arrows of pure light, a hammer that seemed to bend gravity around itself. Magnificent breathed. "Dangerous," corrected. "These need to be secured and studied before anyone tries to use them." But as they approached the weapons, something unexpected happened. 3 of them began to glow, responding to members of their team. The staff chose Dr. Sarah, a human physicist who had never held a weapon in her life. The moment she touched it, she understood how to manipulate matter at the atomic level. The bow chose a young warrior who had been cast out for questioning traditional tactics. When he drew the string, arrows of starlight appeared automatically. The hammer chose nobody. It remained dark and cold, waiting for someone who had not yet arrived. "This is how it begins," said, watching his team members experiment carefully with their new weapons. Not with conquest or domination, but with cooperation and understanding. Over the following months, the Blade Compact found more weapons and more wielders. Each discovery taught them something new about the ancient race that had created these tests. They learned that the weapons were not just tools of war, but instruments of evolution designed to push their wielders and their entire civilizations to become something greater. A year after its founding, the Blade Compact had grown into a fleet of exploration ships crewed by humans, and they had found 43 ancient weapons and matched 31 of them with appropriate wielders. They had also made contact with 6 other alien species, each of whom had their own legends about powerful artifacts waiting in the dark. Stood once again on the observation deck of their mobile headquarters, but this time he was looking out at an alien star. Hung at his side, its golden energy a constant reminder of how far they had all come. "Any regrets?" asked, joining him as she always did. Smiled, "Just one." "What's that?" "That it took us so long to get started." Behind them, the ship's crew worked together to plan their next mission. Humans and aliens, warriors and scientists, all united by the understanding that growth only came through challenge and change. The blade had chosen well, and the universe was vast, full of wonders waiting to be discovered by those brave enough to look beyond what they thought they knew. Somewhere in the darkness between the stars, ancient weapons waited for the right hands to find them. And for the first time in galactic history, there were people actively searching not to conquer, but to understand. The age of the Blade Compact had begun.